Marty Cagan, you have worked in the product creation of some of the most successful companies in the world, such as Hewlett-Packard, Netscape, and eBay. You are also a writer, a speaker, and a coach, and you have written two books, Inspire, How to Create Tech Products Customer Love, and Empower Ordinary People, Extraordinary Products. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, Marty, I've been reading your book, but I'm curious to know a little bit about your background. You were not born knowing technology. You were at one time a regular human being, and you had to learn all this. So, can you tell us, bring us back from the time that you were in high school, let's say, what is it that drove you towards this field?
Well, it really started even before that. My father was very early. He was actually the first PhD in computer science in the US. And so when I was just a boy, 7 years old, he taught me to program, which of course today is very common. But when I was a child, that was very rare. I was incredibly lucky. It was a good time because, well, first of all, I had somebody who could teach me and tutor me on programming. As anything I wanted to learn, he wrote actually the first book on database management systems. So I grew up around the technology, and then I just wanted to code. And so for the first part of my career, that's all I did. I studied computer science in college, and then I was a software engineer, mostly at Hewlett-Packard, HP
Wow.
Laboratories, the research labs.
So you
But
started,
then, yeah, go ahead.
you started coding since you were very young, and today, well, you said is more common today, but from my perspective, it's not still common enough. I mean, if in many colleges, that is maybe where you are, it is common, but here, for example, in Canada, it's one of those things that only the nerds do, let's say. But coding and technology and computers are taking a bigger and bigger part of our life. Do you think maybe one day coding will be as fundamental part of a school curriculum as mathematics, for example?
I'm not sure. I think I'm glad I learned it. I liked learning it. It was a really interesting way to think about problems. But I don't know enough to know in 20 years. For example, my father, the way he normally programmed was in assembly language, which is, if you, let's just say that is real hardcore. That is true hardcore, right down to the machine. But I never wanted to do that. I wanted to program with normal, what was considered modern programming languages, which are not all that different than they are today. But in 20 years from now, I'm not sure how many people will be programming in these conventional programming languages. There may be higher level of ways of expressing what needs to be built. So I don't know enough about where the future's going to say, well, everybody should be computer literate. But I certainly think that technology education, there's real value to that.
Well, I mean, not everyone use advanced mathematics in their life. Most people use addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, right? And 20 years ago, people would do their problem solving by hand, and now people have advanced phones that can solve all these problems, but still the fundamentals is there, and you needed to know the fundamentals of mathematics to get into something more advanced, and today everyone knows at least a little bit of mathematics. Even if you are an artist, a painter, a podcaster like myself, I know how to add and subtract. And I feel that the world is changing fast. and it's going forward. It's more and more dependent in technology. So I maybe not a particular programming language, but at least the broad stroke of technology should be there in everyone's education, I guess.
It's a good question. I know that I meet people today, young people, that don't know how to read a map. They don't know how to use a map. They know how to use Google Maps.
Right.
And I think it's only a few years away before many people won't learn to drive a car. They will just either use Uber or they will use self-driving technology.
Right.
So things do move forward, and over time, things that we consider important become less so. You might know mathematics, but you probably don't know how to use a slide rule.
Right.
Very few people do today, but for a long time, that was how mathematics was really done.
Right. And right now, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs. And there are always job openings at this moment in the technology sector. If you know how to, I don't know, do whatever in a computer, you have a bigger chance than knowing how to serve in a restaurant of getting
Absolutely.
a job right now. So yeah, well, we are constantly adapting, and I guess people will adapt to where the money is.
Right.
Okay, so I interrupted you. You were studying. What is it? You were studying, and then what happened?
Well, I decided after about 10 years of writing software, I decided that it was even more important to learn how do you figure out what you should write, what you should code. That's really the rest of the problem. Instead of just building scalable quality solutions, we need to decide how to discover those solutions. And so that led me to learn more about product management and about product design. So today I focus on anything a product team needs. So that includes data science, it includes user research, it includes certainly design, engineering, and product management.
And I guess to decide what is it that you should code, you have to kind of have a suspicion of what is it that the customer wants, or what is it that will make the client's life easier. So I guess that is the end job for you. What does a regular Joe Blow wants out there, and then how can I provide it to them? Is that, I guess, the new definition of your job?
Yes, I mean, any technology product has to worry about both those problems. We often refer to it as we have to build the right product, something people want,
right,
and really solves their problem. And we have to build that product right in a way that's reliable and fast and correct.
And I guess a way also to explain it to the client, like, for example, what Steve Jobs says, that the client is not looking for a 5 GB hard drive to carry in their pocket. They are looking for a way to carry 1,000 songs in their pocket. So a way to translate the message to the end consumer who may not even know what the hell is 5 GB hard drive.
Absolutely. In fact, that's really considered the first principle of modern product, which is you cannot depend on your customers to tell you what to build, because your customers don't know what's possible. So this is why we have so many people working in technology to come up with things that customers love, but they didn't even know was possible.
Right. And yeah, and we are having all these new, I mean, Steve Jobs himself, he didn't know people wanted tablets, but now everyone has a tablet. And okay, so you decided to find out what is it that you should be coding, and you wrote, this is your second book. Your first one was Inspired. Can you tell us what was that book about?
Yes, Inspired was really about how to share with uh, product teams. So product managers, designers, and engineers, the techniques that they need to use, the techniques that the best companies use to figure out these solutions. So that Inspired was aimed at product teams, which is really my favorite topic, is helping product teams to come up with very good solutions. That's fun and hard. The second book, though, was because I found many teams absolutely wanted to use the techniques that I talked about in Inspired, but they were in companies where they weren't really allowed to use those techniques.
Wow.
The companies worked in very different ways. And so I realized I needed to share not just the techniques of good teams, but the techniques of good leaders.
Right. I think in your book, you highlight the difference between a product team and a feature team. So can you tell us more or less what are you talking about?
Yes, and that's very much gets to the heart of what we are talking about here. In most companies that aren't very good, which unfortunately I would say is most companies, what happens is the executives, the stakeholders, they decide what they want the technology teams to build. And they usually put those things on a list of features and project, and that list is called a roadmap. And they give that to the teams and say, build this. And the teams are really just there as feature teams. They're just there to implement those features. Unfortunately, we learned a long time ago that most of those features, and it doesn't matter how smart your executives are, most of those features will not actually work. They won't actually solve the problems for customers. So it's interesting, but good companies don't work that way. Good companies hire good people, and then they let them figure out the best way to solve those problems. So rather than giving them a list of features to build, they give them a problem to solve. Yeah. A real problem to solve. It might be a customer problem, like you gave the classic example of, I want to be able to play music anytime, anywhere, my music. Or it can be a business problem, like we have too many customers decide they don't like our service every year.
Right.
That's a business problem.
Yeah. Okay. And would you say this is an educational failure? I mean, there is only one Amazon, one Google, one whatever, but most companies operate this way that is not the most effective way. They are learning this inefficient way of operation and management somewhere. So would you say that's the way they're being taught and all the, all the major colleges, and then only through experience and exposures to people like you or forward thinkers like Jeff Bezos, they can discover a different way of management?
It's a very hard question. I mean, why so many companies don't work this way, especially because it's really not a secret how Amazon and Apple and Google and Netflix, how they work. It's not a secret. There are many books that share how they work. And it's also not a secret how successful they are. They're literally the most valuable companies in the world. So you'd think most companies would be very anxious to work that way. But I do think there's a couple fundamental reasons, and you're getting on one of them, which is the leaders at those other companies have never worked that way themselves. Mm-hmm. So they don't know how to work that way. They don't know what it means to work that way. And it's true, it's not taught in business school. It's not taught, CEOs of companies come from everywhere. But in general, they're not taught these things unless they happen to come from one of these companies. And that's where you find so many good places.
So if it's not taught in business school, why not? If we can see this is what works, why people are just relying in an archaic system of top to bottom management?
Yeah, this is very frustrating to me. It's very frustrating why universities in general, business schools, other programs as well, don't teach this. Now, of course, the real answer to that, in my experience, is that the people, the faculty, you rarely worked at one of those companies. Mm. Many of them have never worked in any companies. So,
yes.
So it's, they don't know. And so it's called the blind leading the blind. And we have that situation for many years. And it's not just in universities, but it's others. But there's another reason too, in addition to not knowing how the best companies work because they've never seen it. I think this other reason gets to a deep problem, which is arrogance. People think that they know what needs to be done. Right. And they think that their job as the leader is to tell the organization what to do. Right. And in fact, that's called command and control management. It's the old style of management and leadership. And I see that in so many places around the world. And it's, I think it really does stem from arrogance. The best leaders I know have a very different approach, whether it's Reed Hastings at Netflix or Bezos at Amazon, or, you know, originally Steve Jobs and now Cook at Apple. These leaders, Larry and Sergey at Google, they know that the best solutions don't come from them. They come from the teams. And they know that their job is to provide the environment that those teams need in order to do good work.
How about,
and that is, yeah, that's a fundamental difference.
So you just mentioned some quote unquote great leaders. And there are some leaders that at the time they were considered to be great leaders as well. And I'm thinking in particular of Jack Welch from GE, who at that time he was considered to be top of the line, but he had a leadership of terror, and his employees and manager were all terrified to be caught off in the next, I don't know, company review.
I know, and I never knew him personally, so I can only talk, you know, based on what we read and learn. I did notice that GE was one of those companies that moved to Six Sigma. Do you remember Six Sigma? Yeah. This was a process which I was shocked that they did that because we knew in the innovation world that is terrible. I see. But I think the reason he did it, of course, is because his focus was not innovation, really. His focus was manufacturing. And manufacturing is a very different problem than innovation.
Right, right. But when you are leading, and when all your followers are following you out of fear and not out of motivation to create a better product, a better service, there is I mean, you may end up being productive like he was for a while, but I don't know if too many people were eager to work there at GE.
No, and I don't know enough about whether or not he was a tyrant. I'd never really heard much of that, okay. But I do a lot, you know, there's no question that they didn't have a lot of innovation going on. And that is deadly for that kind of company.
Right. Okay, so let's go to your book for a second. I saw it's divided in 10 chapters. Also, you are a coach, and chapter number 2 is about coaching. Can you talk about your coaching philosophy, and in particular, one-on-one coaching? And also you have another segment about imposter syndrome. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because I think many of us suffer from, first of all, lack of one-on-one coaching, and secondly, from imposter syndrome.
Right. Well, the broader topic is, this is one of those very big differences between the best companies and most companies. In most companies, they interview you, they hire you, and then good luck. You're pretty much on your own. And how does somebody learn how to be good at their job? The normal way you learn is coaching. And I realized and I mentioned I was a software engineer, a developer for the first 10 years of my career, and that was at HP Labs. Every single day of those 10 years, I had at least one manager whose job it was to coach me. And what that means is to get you ready for, first of all, to do your job well, and then to do the next job, to be ready for a promotion. And that is something that in many companies they don't do. But in the best companies, they understand how critical this is. In fact, of all the responsibilities of a leader, the number one responsibility is to coach and develop their people. And that is something you really do see at the best companies, but you often don't see at most companies. Now, when you're coaching somebody, there are many, many things you need to coach them on, depending on what their job is. I remember when I first tried to learn the product management role, the person who was coaching me, I had good technical skills because I had been an engineer, but I didn't know how to interact with customers. I didn't know the financial sides of the company. And he realized that I had these holes, gaps in my skills. And he made sure that I filled those gaps. He made sure I went and visited many customers. He made sure that I spent time with the finance people. He made sure that I was able to do the job the way I needed to do. If that hadn't have happened, I would have done terrible. I know that. So that's why we depend on a leader. Now, one of many things that we often coach people on is doing things, for example, like standing up in front of an executive team and giving them a presentation about why some decision is the right decision. And of course, many people are very nervous about that. I was. Most people, I would say, are nervous, at least the first times they do that. They don't know if they've prepared. They don't know if they really are qualified to have this opinion. And that's a form of imposter syndrome. They worry. Now, we also have to say that some people suffer from severe anxiety, and that is a different issue. That's a mental health issue that people struggle with. And I'm talking here not about a true mental health challenge. I am talking here about a very common phenomenon, which is, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I don't know if I'm worthy to do that. I think this is very normal. It's a sign of somebody who is not arrogant. Right. It's a sign of somebody that realizes that they don't know everything. Right. And they're being asked to make a recommendation that might have millions of dollars consequence. And so they're nervous. And I think this is a very normal, healthy situation. It's really their brains warning them that we better prepare. We have to prepare. So as a manager, as a coach, that is one of the very common and important kinds of coaching you can give. And when I do that, I tell the person, it's normal that you're nervous. I was nervous. I'm still nervous in certain situations. But here's what I do in order to prepare. Right. And here's what you want to do.
And when you speak about coaching, do you mean about putting time aside? Let's say every month, end of the month, we just sit down and we talk about your goals and this and that, how you can prosper. Or do you speak about slightly nudging your employees to the direction that they should be going and kind of give them little by little encouragement?
Both, but much more. It's normally a minimum of once a week, a minimum. Once a week for an hour a week. And during that time, you're giving them lots of nudging. Now, it's important. Your job as a coach is not to tell them what to do, but it's to help them prepare so that they can succeed. So like when I was told, look, Marty, you have to go visit customers because you really don't know customers. that is what I did. Or I was asked, go spend time with finance because you don't understand the details of the financial situation and you need to. So that's not, I wasn't being told what to do. I was being told how to prepare and how to learn what I needed to learn so that I could do my job. And that's really what a good coach does.
Okay. Okay. And you also have chapter number 3 is about staffing. And in staffing, there is a social issue going on right now, which is diversity in most companies, and some of the big companies that you have mentioned, in particular Google, I can recall off the top of my head, have been accused of lack of diversity. Many of these tech companies, they have in their staff the top management and even the board of director, no offense, but a whole bunch of white dudes there,
Right.
hardly any woman, hardly any minority. So how should companies start addressing this problem?
Well, it is a real problem in technology. And Google's, I mean, if you've been following the news, even this week, there's been a huge issue going on around that at Google. I will say Google used to be much worse at this. Now, it's not that they were anti-diversity. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting, I don't think I've ever met a leader at Google that I didn't think had their heart in the right place. The problem was they only thought there was a very specific kind of person they could hire, which was somebody who went to a top university, Stanford, their favorite, Harvard, okay, MIT, that's good. And then even more, they had to be in a very specific educational program, like computer science. And if it wasn't that, they were like, well, we don't think you can help. The problem is, people go to those universities and in those programs, they all look alike.
Right.
They're pretty much all white guys. Yep. And not only that, I mean, even separate from gender and race, they are taught to think the same way. Mm. And what we know is that to innovate, we need people that think different ways. Now, in truth, Google has changed their rules. They are now much more open to people who've gone to different universities, or in many cases, no university. They're also trying to get people with different life experiences, different ways of solving problems, different views on the world, different views on technology, different views on customers. And that is, that's better. Now, it is still hard to change. And one of the things that I tell hiring managers is that if you really want diversity, it's not going to come through your HR department. These people are not going to come knock on the door. You have to go get them as a manager. You have to go find them and recruit them. And that's what a good hiring manager does. And if they want people to if they want a team where everybody approaches the problems differently, they have to look for people with different life experiences, different educations. Right. Today, I think the good leaders are much smarter about that. I find some of my absolute favorite people have come from such radically different educations, radically different backgrounds, parts of the world. And I think too slowly, the technology companies are starting to learn this, and it's starting to move through the organization. Right. But this is a very entrenched problem.
Mm. The title of your book is called Empowerment, and it focuses mostly on management, on leaders, how to empower their staff or the subordinate. How about when that employee doesn't want to be empowered? He just wants a checklist of things to do, no responsibility. I don't want to think you want me to code, I'll code. If you want me to do a design, I'll do it. But I just don't feel qualified enough to look at the big picture. So what would you say about this kind of situation?
Well, there's really two cases there, and we need to know the difference. If it's just that they don't feel confident, that's imposter syndrome, like we talked about before, and we can help them to do that. It's also true that there are some people in the world that are very smart, that it's not the issue of whether they're smart enough. They don't want it. They just want a job. We say they just want a job. They don't want a career. They don't really care. They just want their paycheck. Sometimes people talk about this as you want people who think like an owner, not like an employee.
Right.
And honestly, those are the people I would encourage to go work at General Electric. You know, that is not what we need in a tech product company.
Right. Okay, Marty, this has been an amazing conversation. Can you reach behind your back and flash that book that you have there and tell us where people can find it and where they can follow you?
Well, this brand new book, I just got it a few days ago from the publisher. It's just out a couple days ago. But it is available all over the world right now. Amazon. Coincidentally, I know you're in Canada. Canada was the first country to have the books and distribute them, but the rest of the world, it's just spreading out right now. So and it's available in the paper like this, or Kindle, or audio. So I hope people find it useful.
And where can people follow you?
Oh, certainly at svpg.com. That's the website we have. And then Twitter, it's at Cagan, Cagan.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marty.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.